If you find this content valuable, you can support it by leaving a tip on my Ko-fi page or by clicking the Super Thanks button below the YouTube player. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Okay, so consonance and dissonance. So, like I said last time, this is one of the most important things I could ever teach you. Just kind of the philosophy of consonance versus dissonance. So, do you have a definition for either of these words with respect to music, or even just like the dictionary definitions of these words in your head already?
No.
Is this something that you think about much consciously when you're writing music?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it constantly, but I do think in like the kind of music I write, most things are like pretty consonant, and dissonance is only used like sparingly.
Interesting. So I'm gonna expand your understanding of dissonance here, because there's actually a lot of dissonance in your music and in all music, really. That's a very good starting point you've brought up here, because that's like a very normal conception of dissonance. Most people kind of think of dissonance, or at least at first, they kind of think of dissonance as like an ugly sound or like a very overt clash of notes, something that sounds kind of nasty. Like you hear the word dissonance, you think of that's dissonance, right? And that is dissonance, certainly, but that's not the only form of dissonance. Then the other side of the coin is people think of consonance as like a pleasant sound, like sounds nice and clean. And this is dissonance again. It's ugly. And again, it certainly can be that, but those are kind of limited understandings of these concepts. So it's less about the pleasant versus the ugly than it is about stable versus unstable. So stable obviously means there's no clear desire to move anywhere else. Like it's stable right where it is. It's like if I just create a little bit of context here. So let's say we're in the key of C major. So this chord, the one chord, the home chord, and we'll talk about chords more in the future, of course. But the home chord here sounds stable, right? There's nothing that signals that you want this to move to like a different chord or any different notes or anything. Everything just feels good where it is. Like you could end the song on this chord and it would feel like a nice, satisfying, clean ending, right? You wouldn't feel like you're on like a cliffhanger or anything like that, right? So that's stability. On the other side of the coin, there are a lot of different ways to create a feeling of instability, which if stability is just, where everything sounds like it's already where it ultimately wants to be, instability is, there are various ways to create this feeling. And this is usually subconscious in the audience. Like they're not listening to a song and thinking, oh, I hear this chord and I really want it to specifically move to this next chord, and then it either does or doesn't. No one's actually thinking, well, not no one. I think about that stuff sometimes, but most regular audience members are not like consciously aware of that when they're listening. Yeah. They're just kind of letting it all happen, but it still is a huge part of their experience. There's all sorts of things about music that affect you in ways that you might not be aware of. And this is like one of the most fundamental ones. There are lots of things, even in very simple music, music that doesn't have, that kind of stuff in it. There are all sorts of elements in there that create these subtle expectations, subtle desires to move in certain directions. And that could be an unstable chord, for example. Like, let's say we're in the key of C major again. Here's our home. And then if I play a chord like this, there's a distinctly different feeling to this chord than that one, right? This one feels like home. And then this one. Do you feel that kind of subtle pull, like where you want it to go somewhere? It doesn't feel like this is where we want to end the song, right? It wants to kind of move, it wants to resolve, right? So that's dissonance. That's one form of dissonance. So it's not necessarily like an ugly, brutal clash, but it is unstable. It creates at least some amount of desire to move in a particular direction. So that's what I mean by dissonance, that instability. And so it could be a chord. It could even be just a single note. Even it doesn't even have to be like vertical intervals. It could be. So here's the key again. What if I just do like? Can you hear? I don't know if I don't know how tuned into this you are yet, but can you hear at least some kind of feeling of this not being home? Like, yeah. And can you hear in your head the specific note that it's kind of pointing towards? I couldn't hear you there. Cut out.
I'm trying to sing it. Yeah, I feel like it just needs to go up like one step.
That one? Was that the note you were thinking of? Yeah, exactly. So that's a very clear example of a single note that has dissonance in its sound. Even just that one note. It's not clashing with any other notes that we're playing at the same time. It's just that one note, and it has this power to it. It has this energy. It's like creating interest just based on the context. By the way, there's nothing about this note. It's not like this key on the piano always has this expectation attached to it. It's all relative, right? So it's this note in the context of this key, right? If I change the key, the function of the note's going to change. But in this key, this happens to be scale degree 7, and scale degree 7 is the one that is just right below 1. It really wants to push up towards that 1. But yeah, this dissonance in a single note there. And there's all sorts of other forms of dissonance as well in music that I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, that's kind of the starting point here. Are you with me so far? Any questions or thoughts?
No, I am with you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, even if it's not some sort of like very obviously ugly clash of a sound, there's still going to be a lot of consonance and dissonance happening all the time in every style of music. And like I said, this is like the fundamental energy source. This is like the sun. If your music is some sort of solar system, like all the energy in the solar system comes from the sun, and you're just kind of harnessing that energy and pointing it in whatever directions you want to as the composer. So this is what it all comes from. This is your juice to work with here. And this concept, it can even get pretty abstract. You know, the idea of consonance versus dissonance. Another way of saying this, by the way, is just tension and release. Right? So dissonance is tension, consonance is release. And I'm sure you can imagine what I'm getting at here. There's like, even if we leave the keyboard and the actual notes aside for a second, just like very broadly speaking, there's going to be tension and release in pretty much every element of the music. So there's even, as I'm sure you know, because you have, did you say you were in marching band? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the drum line. Yeah, so you have a lot of experience with rhythm. There's even tension and release in the rhythmic dimension. Like, do you know about like strong beats and weak beats, stuff like that?
Yeah.
So like a strong beat would be like a consonant moment in time, and then a weak beat would be like a more dissonant moment in time. And then you can zoom in, it's like fractal. So you have not just the actual beats in the meter, but then you have like, you could zoom in at the level of the 8th note or the 16th note, and you have strong and weak ones relative to each other. So you have all these little pockets of consonant moments and dissonant moments rhythmically. And you can work with that in all sorts of very powerful ways. You can have that link up with the harmonic dimension. So you could have, you know, a dissonant chord on a dissonant moment in time, and that's going to kind of enhance that feeling of tension. Or you could deliberately mismatch them. You could have a dissonant chord on a strong moment in time. That's going to feel a very different kind of way, like the same exact chord, just played, you know, slightly later or slightly earlier. It's going to really affect the function of it, because you're going to have that kind of now dissonance between two of the different elements of the music. It's like the rhythmic dimension and the harmonic dimension are now dissonant against each other at this moment. So you have like this like meta dissonance, as well as the individual consonance and dissonance in each specific element. There's all sorts of artistic ways you can work with that. You could probably imagine there's all sorts of very specific like emotions that you could portray by getting really fine-grained and deliberate with how you're using your consonance and dissonance like that. You could even think of consonance and dissonance in terms of form or arranging even. So like, the chorus in a song you could think of as like a consonant moment, a consonant piece of the song. It's like there's a sense of like arrival at the chorus. It feels comfortable. It's the thing that you really wanted to hear all along. And then when you're in the verse or the bridge or the pre-chorus or whatever, it's like you've been kind of pulled away from whatever planet you're orbiting. It's like you want to get pulled back in there, but you have to spend some time away. And then so when you come back to the chorus the next time, it's that much sweeter because you spent some time kind of longing for it. The verses are always, or almost always, not as good sounding as the chorus. Chorus is always like the good part, and the verse is really just to kind of delay the well, it's not just, obviously there's a lot of reasons for a verse, but one of the functions of the verse is to deprive you of the chorus. It creates that tension, it creates that desire to arrive somewhere, so it enhances the chorus. It makes it more interesting to listen to. If it were just like the good part the whole time, like that wouldn't work as well as having some in between parts as well. So there's the formal level of consonance and dissonance. Like I said, arranging, you could think of like, maybe when the bass drops or the drum groove comes in, that's the feeling of like settling in, stability, like we've arrived in the full arrangement. And then maybe later on the drums drop out and there's this feeling of suspense where you're kind of thinking like, okay, when's the drum beat going to come back in? It creates this sense of expectation, instability, and then it comes back in. It sounds, it feels very satisfying and like some sort of resolution where you've settled back into that. So arranging is a really big thing in tension and release as well. You can really play with the idea of tension and release in every dimension. I can't even think of a single element of music that doesn't have tension and release as its kind of core engine. Even like phrasing, a 4-bar phrase, an 8-bar phrase, these nice kind of standard round numbers tend to feel very stable. It's like the melody was exactly as long as you expected it to be. It feels stable. But sometimes you could have a 5-bar phrase, or like a 7-bar phrase, and it's gonna feel much less comfortable because it's unusual. It's like these odd numbers that we're not expecting. So yeah, like I said, it's in everything, and it's so helpful to just be aware of this and to start thinking about how you can use this to your advantage as the artist, because the possibilities are limitless. So I'll show you a couple more actual examples on the keyboard here. But first, any responses or questions?
No, it's super exciting to think about.
Excellent.
Like the possibilities.
Nice. Yeah, this is huge. So yeah, let's go to the keyboard here for a second again. So very constant, very stable. And then here's that same chord I was playing before. This happens to be 5/7, which I will explain later if you don't remember what that means.
I know this guy.
Okay, nice, excellent. So that the 5 chord specifically targets the 1 chord, right? So if I play this chord, there is, it's not like an ugly, crazy sound, but there is some level of desire created when you hear this in this particular context. There's this tension to it that wants to move, not just anywhere. Like, it's not like, it's more specific than just like, oh, this chord sounds tense, let's get off of it. It's like it points to a specific destination, right? So the 5 chord makes you want to hear, or makes you expect to hear the 1 chord next, right? So tension, release, and this is not surprising or anything. This is just like straight up, standard. Like everybody in the audience is like, okay, I've heard that a million times before, but it's still feels good. So you can do that. You can just you can give the audience exactly what they expect, and that's going to be this kind of nice, pleasant sound. But it also is predictable sometimes, and if you just only do that, it'll be probably kind of boring. So the cool thing is when you know specifically what the audience expects to hear after you play X, Y, Z, then you also know what they don't expect to hear, right? It's just like all the other places you could go is what they're not expecting. So it's really important to know like what when you play any note or any chord, what is that actually doing to the audience? Is it creating some specific expectation? And again, it's usually not a conscious expectation. We're talking about like very subtle, like it just kind of feels a certain way and they don't even realize it. But again, a lot of composition is just like exploiting the subconscious stuff that's going on in the audience's mind and body. They're usually not going to follow what's happening, but it still matters. It's our job as a composer to know how all this stuff works behind the curtain and to be like the evil mastermind who's like manipulating the audience and they don't even realize it. It's kind of fun. But yeah, so you know that there's some feeling of wanting to go here. So you also know that if you go, say, I don't know, here, that feels a very different way, right? There's some level of subversion of expectation. You weren't expecting that chord.
That's kind of lovely.
Yeah, it's a cool one. So this happens to be a flat 6 major 7 chord, and we'll talk about what all that means later. Which is it is a pretty surprising chord because it is a fulfilling of this desire to resolve, but it's resolving in an unexpected way. And the cool thing about an example like this in particular is, so if you think about the individual notes here, I'm not going to spend time actually spelling out each note, but if you just understand that there are 4 different notes you're hearing at once here, and when I say the 5/7 chord, what I really mean is this note, this note, this note, and this note. It's not really one thing. It's 4 different things at once, kind of all interacting and adding up together. And then they're targeting the one chord, which is not really a singular thing either. It's really just what we call this note, and this note. So you got these notes targeting these notes in particular. And so the surprising thing I played gives you 2 of the notes that you expected, but it gives you 2 notes that you didn't expect at the same time.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
So you get this. You're still getting this note and this note, but then you're also getting this note, which even just that note on its own sounds pretty surprising, right? Especially if I reestablish our key here, and I just play this note. It's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that one. It's a non-diatonic note. It's a chromatic pitch. Remember those terms from the first session?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an example of surprising non-diatonic note coming in. Then you also get this one, which is also non-diatonic. So you're getting 2 expected notes and 2 unexpected notes. So it's a very specific thing you're doing to the audience. That you're playing something that creates a specific expectation, and then you're deliberately playing something right after that has just enough surprise in it for it to have that effect of like, oh, whoa. Not predictable anymore. It kind of grabs the attention again. It introduces these colors that weren't present before. So it's like this intriguing kind of twist in the sound. But at the same time, it doesn't sound just like totally crazy and like incomprehensible to the audience, because there's still those 2 notes that were being targeted specifically. So there's like some feeling of this expected satisfying resolution and then just like a little splash of a twist. So this is just like a random example I'm throwing out here as, just to illustrate the concept of working with expectation, creating expectation, and then handling it however you want to. So you could do another example where you have maybe just one note that's unexpected. So here's the same chord again. All right. So this one actually has 3 diatonic notes, and actually one of them is slightly unexpected because it wasn't one of the ones that was being targeted by that chord specifically, but it's not like a crazy note to hear in this context. It's in the key and everything. And it has 2 of the notes that we definitely were expecting. And it just has, this one, which is really surprising. And of course, there's different intervals in this chord, so it sounds totally different. It's a different motion as well. So yeah, again, I'm just trying to show you've got a lot of options here for how you manipulate the audience once you understand just the basic concept of notes and other elements of music having these feelings of stability or instability attached to them, and the desires and expectations that follow from that, and then just being able to do with that whatever you want. That's kind of like the game that we're playing as the composers. Like, how do we want to take these energies and do cool things with them that are going to create certain effects that we want the audience to experience when they hear it. And it can get very deep because this, ideally, once you have all this technical stuff established and you can actually like start really expressing yourself through it, it gets down to like, ideally, you're not just playing stuff because it sounds cool or whatever. Like you're really deciding what you're trying to say, what you want the audience to really feel when they hear this, and you're aware of all the different elements of the music supporting each other in deliberate ways. So, like I said, you could be aware of what you're doing in the rhythmic dimension and the lyrical dimension and the harmonic dimension, the melodic dimension, the arranging, the form, everything. It all has an effect. You're hearing all these things at once when you hear a song or whatever. And they're all kind of subtly doing something to the audience. So the ultimate level of expression here is when you can have full control over all of them and like really make all these different elements join together and create a deeper effect than you could possibly create with just any one element on its own. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So yeah, it's this interaction between different facets of the musical experience that is going to be where a lot of the depth that you're able to create comes from. And again, the thing that unites them all is they're all just ultimately manipulations of tension and release in various forms. So again, this couldn't be more important. This is like pretty much the biggest thing ever as far as I understand it. Consonance and dissonance. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems like kind of like a deeper level, like a dark magic level of like mastery when it comes to music, because there are probably tons of people that are not consciously thinking about this and still making songs, and those songs are like okay, but I would imagine that like the best masters of this craft are doing this quite purposefully.
Well, actually, I'm not even sure if this is a really interesting thing about really any creative medium is there seem to be all sorts of different ways to be really good at them. Like for just to make it about music specifically here, a lot of very successful, very powerful musicians and composers seem to have like a very intuitive approach. Like, like I said, a lot of them can't even read music, and maybe they're not even consciously aware of any of this stuff. But for whatever reason, they just have this sense where they can just like make the magic happen just by kind of following their gut, So it's like maybe they're more like the audience is, where it's like all this stuff is working, but it's kind of in the background, and they're not necessarily, like intellectually dissecting it and consciously deploying these things. Maybe it's just they're just able to kind of feel it out and just make it all happen. But regardless, whether you're actually thinking about this stuff consciously or it's just happening, intuitively, the bottom line is the stuff that's happening is still the same either way. Like it's still this manipulation of consonance dissonance, whether the audience is aware of it or not, whether the composer is aware of it or not. So I find that for me, it's really helpful to be aware of it, to be able to consciously think about it when I want to. And I'm not always consciously thinking about it. I think there is a lot of value in just kind of following the flow sometimes. You don't always have to let your thinking mind get in the way. Sometimes it does get in the way. But yeah, it's really, like I said, I think in the first session, it's really a kind of an individual journey here. You got to figure out how you need to do it. And it might be different in different situations. Sometimes you might be very kind of intellectual with it, very deliberate and cerebral. And then other times you might just be totally turning your thinking mind off and just letting it flow. And then sometimes it'll be a mix of both in different ways. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways to arrive at this stuff. And I don't know what's going to work for you, but it's really good to just be aware of this and to at least experiment with bringing it in consciously and seeing how it works for you. So yeah, I would say just try to take this in and start thinking about it in whatever ways make sense to you and see how it starts to sit, see how it feels. And there'll be a lot more on this as we go. Like I said, this is where it all comes from ultimately. So we'll be talking about consonance and dissonance constantly. But yeah, there you go. What do you think? Any other thoughts or questions?
Just that I know that this kind of stuff gives me more confidence knowing that, like understanding it. So I'm grateful to be diving into it now.
Love that. I'm grateful for your interest and appreciation of the black magic here, because it is a lot of fun and very powerful. If you want to learn more about this or anything else in the wide world of music, I do private lessons over the internet. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. You can also help me make them by clicking the super thanks button below or by donating to me directly through my Ko-fi page. And thank you. This channel is dedicated to providing free, high-quality music education to the world, and your support makes that possible.